right, so the rest of this video playlist shows you is demos that I did when we were in the clay studio on campus. And some of those things are a little different for us here in our home studios. So one of those is wedging. If you have clay that's coming straight out of the bag, you can skip the wedging. So if you have bits and pieces of your clay that have been like taken apart and put back together, those you're going to want to wedge. Make sure you're wedging on some canvas. But if you're taking clay straight out of the bag, a couple of things you can do that actually speed things up. One is if you have a wire, so this is a cutoff wire that I've purchased. They come standard in clay kits and things like that for pottery. But you can also make one by taking like a piece of string, a piece of fishing line, something like that. And I'm gonna just wire off some of this clay. Now I'm wiring off this top section and setting it aside because it's bumpy and uneven. But watch this. If I wire off and I try to keep pretty steady here, I suddenly have the start of a slab. It's already been, flattened to some extent. I can now roll this out to get it to the thickness I want. And it'll just be a little faster than if you're working with clay that's had to be re-wedged. So you each have a piece of canvas. Always want to make sure you're rolling your clay in between pieces of canvas. But I've actually got a couple other things. One is I've given you, you've got slightly different pieces of canvas depending on what I had for you. So you might have two small pieces or one large piece that you can fold over like this. But if you need more space, you can use other materials. So I wouldn't use paper, but this is like an old curtain or something like that, tablecloth, I don't know. And so I could roll it in between this. It has fluff on it, so I'm going to not do that, but I could, right? A couple other things. So I have given you a rolling pin. Yours is shorter than mine, but don't get clay on this. Once you get clay on this, it's hard to get off, and you're going to have to wash it, but it's also going to mess up your slab. If you put canvas in between it and then roll, a rolling pin from your kitchen would work too, but obviously, you're going to get clay on that, and you may not want to do that. So rolling with the PVC pipe rolling pin that I've given you is a better option. If you want to roll directly with this, there's another trick you can do, and that is you can take a nylon, like women wear nylons under dresses, or at least we did. I don't know. But you can take a nylon and cut off the one leg and wrap that on here, and that nylon will help it not stick. Would it work with a sock? I don't know, maybe. I haven't tried it. I just know the nylon trick. One other trick I want to show y'all, and that is how do you make sure, so as I rolled this slab here, I've got different heights, right? It's a little thinner on this side and thicker on this side. Well, another thing you can do if you want to is you can give yourself some guides. So these are two, like a paint stick and just a random piece of wood, and I checked that they're the same thickness, right? And so I could put those on there, and I put them in between the canvas, so the canvas doesn't add any thickness. So when I roll with my rolling pin, or my PVC pipe rolling pin, I know I won't get any thinner than that. And so I can use these pieces of wood, and sorry, I'm going to get in the way of the camera a moment here, but I can use these pieces of wood to make sure that my slab doesn't get thinner on either end, which it tends to do when you use the rolling pin. And so I probably need to keep working here, but that's going to be the same thickness end to end. The other thing is sometimes when you roll for a while, it's not a bad idea to flip it, flip orientation and flip it upside down, because that'll just, as it stretches, it kind of pulls on the canvas. And so if you can reset it, you'd see I'm running into problems. I got too much stuff on my table, and my too big PVC pipe is running into stuff, which is the other part of the reason you all got smaller ones. Alright, so now I've got a slab that is the same thickness end to end. Now the edges tend to get a little bit of cracking. I do recommend you trim off edges like that. Don't try to use it all the way up to that rounded or cracked edge. If you need a thicker slab, you can always double these guys up. And like I said, this is a paint stick. This is actually a pretty thick paint stick. But if you have painting supplies, that can work. But you can also find other materials that you can use to help support this. A couple of rulers stacked, thin books, I suppose. You just have to make sure that they were the same size. One other thing I wanted to show you, and that is rolling textures. So I have a variety of these texture roller tools that can be used to roll onto the surface. And you don't, right? You likely do not have these at home. If you had time to fire, you could make some out of clay. This is essentially just a tube of wood, but you could make it a tube of clay. If you have woodworking materials, you could make one out of wood. But the other thing you have out there in the outside is trees. And so you could get a stick that has some texture on it and roll it on there. Pine sticks tend to be straight and have a little bit of texture. Similarly, you could find other materials. So here are some, part of a, what is that? Part of a nut or something like that. And you can apply textures with that. I also have a piece of bark that's just kind of a thick, interesting piece of bark. And so it's not going to roll, obviously, but I can press that onto my slab, and that's going to capture some interesting texture. So you have options around your house. The other one I often recommend to people is look on the bottom of your shoes. You might have interesting textures on the bottom of your shoes that you could use.